Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Feliz Navidad.
Y prospero año nuevo.
Si.
I'm shoring up my Latino constituency here.
Yeah, I know. You've got a little work to do on that front. Last time I checked, Mickey. So this is our gala holiday edition. It's not going to last very long, we think, right?
We hope it'll be short. I have a festive wrapping paper behind me. Pretty
Good.
exciting.
Good. You been to any parties? Any holiday parties?
I've been to a lot of Hollywood parties, but it's weird. I've been to so many Hollywood parties. I actually haven't been to so many, but I did go to the premiere of Juno, which was fun. But
is that a movie?
Sorry?
Is Juno a movie?
Yes. And which I liked a lot. But it's sort of obnoxious. I've decided to boast about, I saw Keanu Reeves on the street. So much as I like to mock you for living in the provincial academic town where you live.
You mean you're not going to regale us anymore with tales of the parties you go to?
Maybe I will, but there's just been
that's
so
become
many
a favorite feature on Blogging Heads, Mickey.
I mean, I'm a blogger. I lead a glamorous life.
Right, I know, and that's what people want a window into. That's what we give them on Blogging Heads. It's reality TV. It's like they're at the party themselves.
I don't think so.
Well, I hope you'll reconsider.
Okay, I will. But anyway, I actually forget the cavalcade of stars that I've recently seen. But they
all blur together after a while.
I saw the back of the star of Juno.
Okay.
So there, and a very cute back it was. But she's great in that. Have you seen that?
I didn't even know it was a movie until you told me. As you know, I'm not too plugged into culture or anything else.
It's being billed as the hip movie of the year, so much so that the hipsters are rebelling against it, actually.
Well, I guess maybe I'm with them then. I'm rebelling so hard it hasn't even entered my consciousness.
That must be it.
So, are we going to talk about presidential candidates?
Yeah, Christmas and the campaign coincide this year. It's pretty clear in Iowa. I think that it's an Edwards versus Obama race.
Is that clear? Because I was actually wondering if you'd reconsidered. Last time we talked, you were convinced that the whole Hillary Clinton campaign was dead, dead, dead. You were comparing it to the Titanic after it hits the iceberg, and I was trying to talk you out of that. And are you still so convinced that she's gone?
I'm not convinced she's gone, no, but I am convinced she's going to lose Iowa. I mean, she's convinced she's going to lose Iowa.
Well, just today in the paper, they said the Clintons are bringing in reinforcements. Two of your favorite unions, in fact, the teachers' union and public employees' union.
Oh, really? I missed that. That certainly speaks well of her.
Well, but they do work on the ground, you know.
No, I know.
So,
but supposedly she's lowering expectations, and it just
well, didn't her husband say it would be a miracle if she won Iowa? Right. I'd call that lowering expectations.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me is, two things. First, the conventional wisdom is that she'd rather finish third to Edwards than second to Obama. That she's really terrified of Obama. And I don't quite know why she isn't terrified of Edwards. Why does she think if Edwards wins Iowa that he won't win New Hampshire and beat her exactly the same way Obama would?
Well, isn't Edwards polling lower than Obama nationwide among Democrats?
That doesn't matter. I mean...
Well, it doesn't matter. See, that's the thing you're discounting in terms of, when you discount the whole Hillary campaign, it seems to me. I mean, look at her numbers among Democrats nationwide. She's got something like 40. She gets something like 44%, way more than Obama, who like 20 points more. And those numbers can be volatile, but I think in this case they probably, will be less so than usual because most Democrats, I think, have a pretty clear idea of how they feel about Hillary Clinton. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of attrition in that number, and for that reason, I think that for Edwards to Obama or Obama to win, they're going to have to turn it into a two-person race really, really soon. That's my theory.
Well, it will be a two-person race really, really soon. One of them will lose.
Well, why, though? I mean, Obama's got enough money to carry on through Super Tuesday, right? And does Edwards?
Edwards is, even if he loses in Iowa, I think Edwards is dead if he loses in Iowa.
Really?
But I don't think Obama is dead. I agree, but
I don't think that's true because nobody expects Edwards to win. So he can win the expectations game without winning the caucus.
That's possible. I mean, if he finishes a close second to Obama, that's possible. But here's the thing. There's this guy, a blogger named Jerry Skurnick, who has this theory of the two electorates, which is that they're the people who are well informed, who are much better informed than they were in previous years, and then the people who were not following the campaign, and they were actually less well informed than in the era when they watched Walter Cronkite every evening and at least got some political news. And they find out stuff very late. I mean, they're only now finding out that Mitt Romney's a Mormon. So the national polls reflect that relative ignorance, and they will change rapidly. The voters in Iowa, who are the people who are paying attention, where the vast mass of people are up to speed, those are the polls that matter. This has been true in every election of our lifetime. Why should it be different now that the national polls at this stage don't matter?
But who are you saying that helps, if it's true? That there's going to be a lot of late-breaking information?
Exactly. It helps whoever breaks late in Iowa and wins. Whoever surges in Iowa, and it doesn't look like Hillary Clinton is about to mount a surge.
Well, what if the information that enters their minds is negative about Obama or Edwards?
No, that could work, but I don't see what negative information has there been about Obama that's changed anybody's mind.
But you're saying that this is information that the yous and I's of the world already know, but these people don't know, and I can think of a lot of it about Obama. Namely, his middle name is Hussein. I mean, all the stuff that makes some people skeptical. That he used cocaine. That whatever.
All I'm saying is that has nothing to do with the national polls. That'll be a new poll that is taken when the Iowa people vote. Where he is now nationally is not really that important. Right now, Hillary is rising nationally. Obama is sinking.
But see, I maintain that Hillary's national numbers are firmer than national numbers usually are because she's much better known to these people than candidates usually are at this stage. But everyone has a clear opinion about Hillary.
That cuts both ways. The traditional reason to discount those polls is that they just reflect name recognition. That goes double here. That they just know Hillary, so they're for her. But so when they find out about somebody else, that somebody else will become appealing.
Well, okay, but why is it you're so sure she can't win Iowa when the polls have her within 3 or 4 points of Obama?
I just don't see her. I don't think she has deployed any sort of negative attack that has any traction at all. That I guess she's now saying Obama's not up to speed in foreign policy. And he points out, which I'd forgotten actually, that he's been on the Foreign Relations Committee for 3 years. That's not being president, but that's not nothing. So I just don't, she's shooting her wad, as it were, and I don't see that it's having tremendous damage.
Okay.
I mean, it may soften up, open up the road for Edwards, but which brings us to the other, what seems to me the big non-story, which is that the Inquirer printed this a second round of its Edwards Mistress story, which, as you know, I was promoting.
Yeah, I saw that you blogged about that. I mean, uncharacteristically, you don't like to get into scandals and innuendo, but you made an exception.
Well, the weird thing, I'm just wallowing in bad karma this week because everybody's giving me grief for how could you promote this scandal.
Well, especially when it seems to be falling apart before our very eyes. I mean,
It's certainly not falling apart. Why is it falling apart?
Well, the story is, I just, reading your blog and checking out one link. Okay, there's this woman who supposedly was having an affair with Edwards. Okay.
Correct.
And now, supposedly, she's pregnant with his child. Okay.
Right. And
6 months
why
pregnant. And now Andrew Young, right, is saying he's the father. And you're saying that is a cover-up for the fact that Edwards is a father because Andrew Young is an ally of Edwards, right?
I'm not charging that. I'm saying it's highly suspicious.
But Mickey, if you were Edwards and you wanted to convince people that a baby that was going to be born in 3 months was not yours, wouldn't you choose as the father, as the alleged father, someone other than a black man? You know, when that baby comes out...
What makes us think this guy's black?
Oh, is this not the Andrew Young?
No, it's another Andrew.
I take everything back.
The question is, why would he choose a married man? And I guess the answer is that, the answer is that, you know...
Okay, I have to totally reevaluate then.
No, it's a different Andrew Young. It's his director of finance or operations in North Carolina. By all the conventional rules of scandal, this one should go away under the old rules. Both parties deny it. The wife doesn't seem publicly angry, so the wife isn't pressing the case, and it's hard to get people to none of the principals are talking. They're all lined up with the story. So the question is, do these old rules apply anymore? Given that the truth might be the opposite, and that's sort of the issue. Nobody wants to publish the story for two reasons. One is, even if they suspect it's true, one is nobody wants to hurt Elizabeth Edwards. Everybody loves Elizabeth Edwards, and that's where the bad karma comes from. People were telling me I'm endangering my immortal soul by promoting this story because poor Elizabeth Edwards. But the problem is her husband's running for president, and this goes right to the core charge against him, which is that he's a bit of a phony. The second thing is that everybody's saying, well, if he loses Iowa, we don't have to worry about it. So everybody's waiting for him to lose Iowa, and then he goes away, and they don't have to worry about getting into this seamy mess of the story. But he might not lose Iowa, and then I think the story will come back.
But what is the National Enquirer's record on stuff like this? I mean,
not that bad. I mean, they got the photo of Gary. They actually have a whole. If you buy the National Enquirer, which is on your newsstands now, and in Iowa, by the way, they have a whole sort of tableau of their great journalistic triumphs. One is they got the photo of Gary Hart with Donna Rice sitting on his lap next to the monkey business.
They didn't break the story.
They didn't break the story, but they got the photo, which was sort of the coup de grace. They broke the Rush Limbaugh OxyContin story. They broke
God bless them.
Sorry?
God bless them, I said. Great publication.
They broke the Jesse Jackson love child story. And I think there was one other one. But anyway, they've also they didn't have a tableau of all the stories they got wrong.
Yeah.
They've had George Bush, I think, and his wife breaking up several times. So.
Well, I admit that if this Andrew Young turns out to indeed be a white man, this will be a more plausible cover-up strategy than I had thought. I was thinking Edwards had some pretty short time horizons there. If the chickens were going to come home to roost in 3 months, but
I mean, everybody says that there would never be a paternity test, and because they would never give their DNA. I don't quite see why the press couldn't sort of hound them into doing that.
Or you could do it on Jerry Springer, Get Edwards on and...
But anyway, it seems to me, barring that, Edwards if Edwards soundly beats Hillary why does she think she can get rid of him? I mean, he's, I don't know. Anyway. They obviously feel less comfortable attacking a black person than they do attacking a white person, I think.
No, maybe she genuinely, well, I don't know. You may be right.
Supposedly they were really happy when Doug Wilder dropped out of the race in 1992. So I just don't think they like to go after African Americans.
Well, I had almost forgotten about Doug Wilder. So do you want to talk about Republicans, or should we move on to whatever else you want?
There's a little bit of an interesting. There are two little interesting Mike Huckabee fights. One is he's hired Ed Rollins as his campaign manager, which is the traditional kiss of death. Ed Rollins was... Sid Blumenthal once wrote a hit job on Ed Rollins that totally destroyed his target. I think he did one campaign that was a successful come-from-behind campaign, and after that it's been disaster after
But didn't
disaster.
he work for Reagan or not? Who did he work for?
Well, he ran Reagan's 84 campaign, but that wasn't a real tough one to win,
Okay.
No, but there was one other one before then. There was actually a sort of
Yeah, but Huckabee, everybody's hailing this Christmas ad as a stroke of genius, at least for purposes of winning the Iowa
Well, but I don't think that's what
caucus.
Ed Rollins is doing. Ed Rollins is doing is that somebody, and everybody thinks it's Ed Rollins, gave a blind quote attacking Rush Limbaugh, which has provoked Rush Limbaugh into waging all-out war against Huckabee, which is people think is not a very auspicious thing for Huckabee. So Ed Rollins has already made trouble by giving one of his trademark snarky off-the-record comments, that's what he's famous for.
What do you think of the Christmas commercial, the Huckabee?
I thought it was very effective. It came just. I have a very hard to trigger for church-state questions, and it didn't trigger that, and yet it was appealing and warm. He's very relaxed on camera in his communication style.
Oh, he's a Southern Baptist minister.
But what do you think?
What do I think? I think I would actually rather have a president who, out of deference to the religious sensibilities of non-Christian religious people, just stuck with Merry Christmas and didn't get into the birth of Christ thing and didn't have that. Do you agree that the subliminal cross, was intentional?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And that just seems just kind of devious. I mean, either put the cross behind you or,
Well, the reason it was brilliant is because it started a controversy over the cross, which helps Huckabee reinforce his base.
Yeah, well, still, no, I would rather. That's my own view. Is that
even by saying they can mention Christmas, you've gone further than some people would go. I think Hillary's ads sometimes don't mention Christmas.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Once again.
But he said Bush had an arrogant bunker mentality. You should like that.
Yeah, I didn't know. That was that an article in Foreign Affairs?
It's an article in Foreign Affairs. He has since been that basically said the Bush administration too often had an arrogant bunker mentality, and what
was the overall ideological drift of the piece? I haven't read it. Have you? What's the take on it?
Read it either.
I mean, that sounds like the kind of thing that some reasonable person would say about Bush's foreign policy, but in general, Huckabee, to me, has not sounded all that different from the Republican pack on foreign policy.
I think he has sounded different because he said, well, he doesn't remember if he wrote that line, but he takes responsibility for it. But he has actually said the same thing out of his own mouth before in a speech. So I think it's one of the ways in which he is, having it both ways by being a Republican, yet indicating that he breaks with Bush.
Well, I'll tell you, it does seem to me that there's a fair amount of room on the foreign policy front in between Ron Paul and the PAC. If somebody, in the Republican PAC, if somebody wanted to stake out a position somewhere in there, they might be able to pick up a few stray votes. I don't know.
The problem, and this is a seamless transition to our next topic, Bob,
Excellent.
is the surge.
Yes,
We're
the
right
surge.
at the moment where you would be right, except in Iraq the surge seems to be working, but it's in the balance whether politically we have the will to capitalize on that relative success,
yeah.
or whether the Democrats are going to get in and sort of piss away what General Petraeus has achieved, and that's why this is not the time, if you're a Republican, to mount a trenchant critique of the Bush foreign policy. This is the time to rally around General Petraeus, and that's why I think they're particularly allergic to this Huckabeeism, even though it's probably quite accurate.
Yeah, in your email, you said you were going to give me a hard time about the surge. So I guess this is a part of the show where I'm supposed to pretend like I said the surge couldn't possibly work, and so we should withdraw the troops, and then it'll
might reduce the disaster from a 10 to a 9, and I think that was pretty grudging and niggling and insufficient. Right now, we have Harry Reid admitting the surge has worked after saying the war was lost. We have David Ignatius writing a column saying the problem with the surge has been so successful that there's going to be political pressure to withdraw the troops. And the big thing is you don't see any effective counter-reporting, about how, the surge, the press is saying the surge is a success, but here are these 15 horror stories from 15 provinces in Iraq showing that it's still a disaster. Even the war's critics seem to tacitly concede that there's been an improvement. I finally saw something on Salon.com saying, if this is the good news, what's the bad news? Well, it turns out there's a poll of Iraqis, and the Iraqis thought that the situation won't clear up until the American troops leave. Well, that's probably true. They won't have a stable government until they don't rely on our troops. And we caused the thing by invading the country in the first place. The Iraqi people are obviously perceptive in that regard. But if that's the worst story that the anti-war people can come up with, they're really in retreat.
Okay, but first I just want to clear up. I mean, you talk as if all the good things that are happening in Iraq were caused by the surge, and you write that way. I mean, you write as if you think the surge caused the Anbar awakening.
No, but the surge capitalized on the Anbar awakening that was going on beforehand. I mean, the military has been promoting the Anbar awakening for long before the surge.
Right, but you're always you wrote this item about Juan Cole saying he was wrong because he didn't understand that the surge had caused the Anbar awakening or something like that.
I didn't say that. No, by surge I'm lumping in two things: the Anbar awakening and the increase in troops.
Well, wait. Here's what you wrote. It so happens that I have it with me, Mickey.
Okay, Bob.
I guess Cole had said in June, that look, what's going on is the U.S. military is helping a Shiite government, against the Sunni population. And you wrote this: given what we now know about the Sunni empowering aspects of the surge, including the Sunni tribal awakenings councils on the U.S. payroll, that is Juan Cole's characterization, does not seem like an eerily prescient characterization of the surge's actual effect. And I mean, the Anbar awakening is just a separate thing. It happened, it was not,
Well, but clearly a part of the surge has been that we've been parceling out a lot of money to buy off all these people who have been awakened.
But here's the point. It isn't, I mean, you can call that the surge now if you want.
Well, you're just making it like a definitional point, so what?
No. It's important. I mean, as long as you're going to, be tearing into people like Juan Cole for having gotten it wrong, we should get clear. It isn't just that the Anbar awakening was essentially unrelated to the surge, and then we, fairly adroitly capitalized on it. It's that capitalizing on it is contrary to the actual original logic of the surge. Now, it still is good that it's happening, but just to be clear, I think the only note of skepticism I ever registered about the surge was that it seemed to be tied to a political strategy that I didn't think was going to work, which was to strengthen the centralized control of Iraq from Baghdad, to strengthen the central government. That was an explicit part of the surge. The way things are playing out with the Anbar awakening is not just different from that. It's the opposite. It is exerting a decentralizing effect.
Well, that's true, but so what? Juan Cole was still wrong when he said we were going to back the Shiite government against the Sunnis.
Well, he was just taking. He was taking Bush at his word. Bush had outlined a strategy of strengthening.
Bush at his word? He's Juan Cole. He's supposed to know what the facts on the ground were, and he was imputing. He was saying, "I see what the motives of the Bush administration are," and he got it wrong. Why can't I call him out on that? He's a catastrophist.
No, I just think
every other week he comes up with a different reason why our policy is going to be a catastrophe, and sometimes he's wrong.
I just think you're wrong in saying the Anbar awakening is an effect of the surge, and if he in June said the problem with the surge is that it's us and the Shiites against the Sunnis, the fact is that was what the original strategy was with the surge. We were going to side with the central government.
You're making a classic niggling little point that people make when they're wrong. They say, "Oh well." You're right, but not for the reasons you said you were, and there's a definitional problem.
Well, no.
But the point is that the Bush strategy of not pulling out the way the ISG wanted him to do, and of doubling down and putting in more troops and improvising and taking advantage of whatever strategies were available on the ground, even if they were the opposite of what he originally wanted, has shown success. You are so committed to the idea that the Iraq War is an epic disaster that all you would concede was that it would reduce it on a scale from 10 to 9. When
Mickey,
really it's reduced
but
from
Mickey,
a scale
did I
to 10
advocate withdrawal?
To a semi-acceptable outcome.
Mickey, did I advocate withdrawal?
No, you didn't.
Well, okay,
I'm saying you were grudging and overcommitted to this idea that it was an epic disaster.
No, the war still is. Look, Mickey, wars end. This war has gone on longer than our involvement in World War II, okay? It would be pretty weird if it went on a lot longer than World War II. I mean, wars end. But that doesn't, and this one will wind down in the coming years, and who knows how exactly unstable the situation will be, but it's not. The only thing I'm reacting to is you emailing me and saying that you're going to give me a hard time because actually the surge is working. When you're wrong about what part the surge is actually doing, and the thing you're right about, which is that withdrawing a year ago would have been a mistake, is something I didn't advocate.
So you're now attacking me to our viewers for an excessive email I wrote to you. I withdraw the private email.
No, I also think I just read this blog item and I think it's wrong. It's not the on-bar awakening is not an effective surge.
So what? Petraeus capitalized on what he had going for him, and it worked.
And
adroitly, Bush gets credit for it. You can't say, "Oh, we won the war," but not for the reasons you said. What kind of argument is that?
So you think this is victory?
No, but I'm giving the extreme form of your argument is, so what if the results were good? You have the definition of the surge wrong. Obviously, the surge helped capitalize on it. So what's the problem?
The surge did, and the surge also capitalized. Well, actually, the surge per se, as the surge was articulated, the main fortuitous. Well, I shouldn't use the word fortuitous about this. The main essentially unrelated thing it capitalized on, I would say, is the fact that the ethnic cleansing had played itself out in much of Baghdad. And I'm sure that the troops being on hand in robust form helped capitalize on that fact.
But if you remember, if you go back to our discussions back then, we were worried that Petraeus wouldn't be sharp enough to let the ethnic cleansing happen.
Well, I don't think
he would try to pursue a misguided, idealistic idea that everybody was going to live together in harmony. He doesn't seem to have done that, so shouldn't he get points for that?
I don't know that he let it happen. I just think most of it, a lot of it had happened by the time the surge started. I don't know that he intentionally stood back and let it happen. And I'm not saying I would advocate that either, but...
Anyway, the point is to get a stable enough situation so that the Bob Wright non-zero tendencies toward greater integration into the world economy and peace, harmony, and love can take hold.
I'm for that.
So, and that's that's a lot better than a 9 on the disaster scale.
No, I just disagree. I just think that after 9/11, we were in a position after 9/11 and the Afghanistan war, we were in a position where a do no harm policy would have kept the threat of future terrorism at a much lower level than that threat is now at as a result of the Iraq War. I think chickens are going to come home to roost from this for a long, long time. I think years and years from now, it will be plausible that terrorist attacks, including those in the United States, are actually a result of this war. They'll be hard to trace in some cases, although in some cases they're not. There are stories in newspapers about people who became suicide bombers because of watching the Iraq War on TV. So, but in general, they'll be hard to trace. But my belief is that the terrorist threat against America was a totally manageable problem in the wake of the Afghanistan war, and we've made it much more complicated. And one reason that bothers me is because I do subscribe to this slippery slope theory that if we get much homegrown terrorism here, we're going to react in a stupid way that really makes things way, way worse. So I think an essential part of an intelligent strategy would have been to not radically raise the chances of terrorism directed against America. This war has, I think, radically raised those chances, and, end of story.
I agree with all that, but it's not the end of the story. I wasn't for the war. You convinced me to be against it, and what you're leaving out is, and I agree in the medium term, it creates all this blowback, and it pissed away the moral advantage we had, after 9/11, and we could have managed the problem just by sort of being calmer about it. And it's pretty clear that Bush used this to go after Iraq, which he wanted to do anyway. But in the very long term, there might be some advantages to short-circuiting history by getting rid of Saddam Hussein and having some sort of viable semi-democracy, Arab semi-democracy in the heart of the Middle East, and that might help transform that region, which was not in a favorable situation vis-a-vis the breeding of terrorists, in 30 years, so that we would have been better off having fought the war than not having fought it.
Well, you're a lot of hypotheticals in there.
Oh yeah.
And speaking of those, as the years roll by, you can no longer be sure that Saddam Hussein wouldn't have lost power in some other manner that would have been more conducive to ongoing stability. I mean, it's been nearly 5 years, and you can imagine a lot of things we could have done to undermine his power in other ways. So
that's true. You have to measure against that.
I'm not willing to accept the idea that if things are like quasi-stable in 3 years, and we don't have a totally bloodthirsty autocrat running the place, then that's manifestly better than what the situation would have been, because he might not be there anyway.
No,
and in fact, trends were working against him.
I'm not sure things were working against him. He was about to beat the sanctions and get a huge gush of revenue from the rise in the price of oil. So it's not completely clear he was badly situated. But we will never know the answer. These are all hypothetical questions. All I'm saying is you have to. I think you have to concede that there is this possibility that there's a long-term payoff there. I wasn't for it. I'm just saying you're and I've read Jacob Weisberg's forthcoming book about Bush, and it's convinced me finally that Bush really is an awful president. But
oh man!
But I just think you're a little too crotchety and grudging.
I'm sorry. But did you want to say something about the politics of this?
Well, how do you? I was just the politics of it were just that Republicans have. There's a good reason now for the Republicans not to pursue a middle course critique of Bush foreign policy, because they have to defend the gains of the surge, and that's an issue that's on the table right now. It's weird. I got an email from somebody who claims that Obama knows perfectly well that the surge has worked. And, he's not about to...
I wish you'd quit using that formulation, but I obviously can't convince you. I wish you would say, concedes that things are getting better in Iraq.
Okay, the things are getting better in Iraq.
Because of several things, including the surge. But anyway, I give up.
No,
that really is. No, but I'm sorry, but Mickey, that is a Republican talking point way of doing it, saying it. That's just wrong. It's just objectively wrong. And I'm not just quibbling. I'm just saying it's not true that you can attribute most of the good that's going on now to the surge per se.
The alternative to that's not true, because the alternative to the surge was a timetable for speedy withdrawal that would have thrown away the gains of the Anbar awakening. So the surge involved two things. It involved a recommitment of troops, and it involved not withdrawing. So
well, actually, there's actually a third alternative there, which is just leaving the troops there and not surging. So that actually it isn't that binary. But I'm just saying that is a very misleading way of putting it. That Bush, the Bush Communications Office, that's the way they would put it. That's the way you're putting it, and it's like propaganda. And I'm not surprised, because it's where you are politically.
It's not misleading, because the whole weight of establishment opinion was for Bush to use the Iraq study group to execute some sort of withdrawal from Iraq. He didn't do that. Instead, he went for the surge. That decision is what I'm talking about that seems to have worked.
Well, my main point is
that decision involved capitalizing on the Anbar awakening as opposed to withdrawing, and that's what he gets credit or blame for. He gets incredible blame for starting the war, but it seems to me he gets credit for making that decision.
Well, as opposed to withdrawing, I mean, actually, I don't know that. I actually don't know that just leaving the troops there wasn't the key. Really, I don't know how much value was added by the surge per se.
But it didn't hurt.
Well, no, it didn't hurt. But my main point is just that I'm not. This is not just some kind of petty refusal to acknowledge that anything ever happens on Bush's watch. You're putting things in a basically propagandistic way that I don't think is accurate, and I think it's important to be clear.
I'm saying what I think. I'm saying that Jacob Weisberg convinced me that Bush was a terrible president. It seems to me that's not a Republican talking point.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that there are stakes to this argument. It's not a trivial argument. Whether it's accurate to say, look, it's the surge, as opposed to look.
Paul Krugerman, you dispute things that are true because they happen to coincide with Republican talking points.
Well, if I concede that I'm disputing something that's true, I am forced to agree with what you just said, Mickey, but obviously that's a point of contention here.
You haven't disputed my thing that the Bush's decision in the winter of whenever it was not to go along with the Iraq study group and instead to send Petraeus to Iraq was in retrospect.
I definitely agree that Petraeus was the smart choice.
Well, so he gets credit for it, but that's a Republican talking point, Bob. You're not allowed to say that.
No, I still say it's inaccurate to say that the surge brought us all this, or even a majority of it.
You have a small point.
Well,
that's
no, again, I think it's rhetorically important what spin is legitimized. But anyway, I think our what we're disagreeing about is clear.
Fair enough. Merry Christmas to you.
Bah.
You want to talk about group selection?
Well, I guess just because I keep saying I will, I might as well get over it. The group selection, it's a dispute basically within evolutionary psychology, although the fact that it's now kind of widely followed suggests that actually the evolutionary paradigm, I would say, is prevailing within psychology broadly. And we had this big discussion of it. And as I recall, I spent all my time saying the group selection...
Make it clear what group selection is.
Okay. Well, see, this is where I have to retread a lot of ground.
Well, let me try to characterize it.
Okay.
You tell me if I'm wrong. Group selection is that people sometimes... the behavior sometimes evolves so people do things for the good of the group. I.e., I will sacrifice myself in battle so that my tribe will win.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect example. I mean, that's kind of what I ignored last time. I stressed how much of the debate and how many of the supposed victories of the group selectionists had to do with semantics alone and weren't consequential. But you're focusing on the part that's really consequential, which is in what cases... a lot of times the group selectionists are just saying, well, we should call this evolutionary dynamic group selection, when... whatever you call it, it's going to produce the same outcome. When the debate matters is when group selection predicts different kinds of behaviors than individual selection. And yours is a classic one. I mean, people jumping on hand grenades to save the platoon. That is the kind of thing that... It's not that an individual selectionist can't explain it ever happening, but it's that if it happened a lot, they would have to work harder to explain it. And... it's funny, group selectionists sometimes say, well, how do you explain the fact that people jump on hand grenades to save the platoons? And my line is, how do you explain the fact that basically it almost never happens? When it happens, we give people medals for it because, and the reason you give people medals for things is when they're things people don't naturally do. It's an incentive, you're adding, and it almost never happens. And... here's the difference in a way. See, nobody denies that people are designed by natural selection to live in groups, okay? And that psychological adaptations to group living are central to human existence. The question is, do people, and no one denies that people do things to contribute to the success of a group. And nobody denies that they do things that by themselves amount to sacrifices, taken in isolation, okay? The question is this. Do people do that in a kind of diffuse, undiscerning way? In other words, they just go around being as nice as they can be for the sake of the group and don't really give a second thought to whether there's reciprocation? Or do people monitor the behavior of other people in the group, consciously or unconsciously, and get kind of irritated when other people aren't pulling their weight? Right?
Is that the key argument?
Well, in a way. That is an argument that, as well as any, epitomizes the difference between the two perspectives when the rubber really hits the road. This is where it really matters. This is not just semantics. Which thing do you predict? And Mickey, I would ask you. We were at an organization together at the New Republic. And you've been parts of clubs, and you've been at magazines, and we've all been parts of various groups. And I would say, do you think it's the case that you see people, just kind of undiscerningly doing whatever they can for the group without monitoring what people do? Or do you see them paying very close attention to whether or not other people are pulling their weight too?
The New Republic was a seamless harmony of teamwork.
That was what I liked about the place, is no one working there looked at it and said, how can I use this to advance my career,
Absolutely. But what's politically at stake here? Is my impression is the group selectionists would either like to portray human nature as a lot more benign than the individual selection is. Is that one thing that's at stake here?
Well, they think that's what the case is. Yes, they think they have a sunnier view of human nature. As I said last time, actually, the flip side of group selection is that we might be more belligerent as groups if group selection is right, conceivably. But yeah, that's the drift.
I mean, the whole thrust of your book and the individual selectionists seem to be you can't trust anybody, everybody's a snake, everybody's out for themselves and out to undermine the group under the guise of seeming to be for the group. But
I wouldn't quite go that far, but go ahead anyway.
But it doesn't seem to me why the obvious answer is that it's working on both levels, that people have a stake in the survival of their group, and within the group they're scheming to undermine their rivals.
Well, yeah, no, that's certainly possible. The question is to what extent they would keep contributing for the group's good when their contributions are not being matched by others. And, again, as I said, it's not my belief that group selection can never happen. And in fact, I suggested to, the premier kind of promulgator of group selection, David Sloan Wilson, once, 7 years ago, actually, a scenario in which, actually, I was starting to think group selection could have conceivably been important. And I don't know that he ever did anything with it, and it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't, because he really was not terribly interested in psychology. And
What's the scenario?
Well, it was this, and I hope somebody's done something with this logic, because it really makes sense to me, and it had only just occurred to me. We were at a conference together, and I told him, and he kind of acknowledged the point, but didn't seem to want to do anything with it. It's that group selection makes more sense to the extent that migration rates are low, okay? Like if a bunch of parasites on a rabbit, say, if they don't have many opportunities to jump to another rabbit, then group selection is more likely. Migration rates are key, okay? Now,
why is that?
Well, you just have to kind of think it through and do the math. You might say their fate is more clearly tied to the vehicle, the group, the boat, the rabbit being the ship they're on, if there's no way they can get off, okay?
Right.
So that's kind of the intuitive logic. But what I said to him is that I just realized is that if you look, anthropologically at what seems to happen in group conflict in hunter-gatherer societies or other societies that are kind of pre-agrarian, when there is out and out war, the tradition is to, and you win, the tradition is to kill all the men and take the women. And so I said, actually, for males in human evolution, migration rates in warlike situations may have been effectively very low, whereas for women they were effectively not so low. So you can imagine men having special adaptations regarding the psychology of war that were a product of group selection. Although, if there was a lot of that, I would actually imagine more jumping on hand grenades than you see. But anyway, as a theoretical point, it actually seemed to me very important. But, David, I don't know if he ever,
Because the men jump on the hand grenades because they know if they lose the war, they're all going to be killed.
Well, it's not happening at a conscious level.
I understand.
But, yeah, the idea is that with two hunter-gatherer villages, if it's out and out war, assuming you can't just escape, which actually was often the case, but assuming one side is going to conquer the other in classic fashion, the men are basically going to die. They're not going to migrate to a new society. The women, in effect, in Darwinian terms, migrate to a new society because they're kept alive by the victors. In genetic terms, that is migration to a new group, even though on not quite adverse terms.
Stupid idea. Is that why women are less warlike, because they have less to lose?
No, I actually think the belligerence, this is a good example of something that's pretty easy to explain in individual selection terms. The belligerence of men probably has more to do with males fighting within societies, with the stakes being, having ultimately to do with reproductive success. But I do think men are more belligerent than women, and that part of it's in the genes. But I don't think you have to resort to a kind of group selectionist. And that's not to say it's always one-on-one. You have coalitional fights within societies, and that's where the semantics come in. Well, is that group selection or not? Anyway.
And that was the point you wanted to make?
I don't know if I got around to making the point I wanted to make, but I'm pretty sure I've said as much about this as anybody wants to hear.
Well, but we don't want to. We want to get rid of group selection.
You want to extinguish group selection and not let any of its memes migrate to a future dialogue?
No, we can do that if you want. But do you really still have more points to make about this?
No, I would just say that. Well, I would also say, did you ever retrieve the copy of my book you threw away? By the way,
it's still back there somewhere. No,
yeah.
I haven't.
Well, anyway, that really hurt to see that on camera, Mickey.
It was theatrical.
Yeah,
I thought
that was great theater, but it hurt. Anyway, what I would say is if I rewrote the book, I would be slightly more favorable to group selection, but that would involve deleting, I think, just about nothing in the book in terms of what individual selectionist explanations of human psychological adaptations are valid, I think. Anyway.
Would Richard Dawkins have to rewrite more of his book?
Well, see, he would have to change a little of the language. I think some of the language, like calling the gene the unit of selection, maybe would be revised. And there, some of the semantic arguments have been useful. They've clarified some of the language. I mean, for example, although on the other hand, one thing the argument has made clear is that everyone's a selfish gene theorist in a certain sense. Even if you're a group selectionist, ultimately it is still the case that those genes that flourish are those genes whose properties are conducive to their own proliferation. That's true regardless of whether the vehicles are individuals or groups or what. That's just natural selection. So it is genes that are in some sense successfully selfish, in a metaphorical sense, that prevail under either scenario.
So he wouldn't even have had to change the title of his book, which is The Selfish
No,
Gene.
he could become a full-fledged group selectionist and keep the title, which he's not going to do. Not going to become a full-fledged group selectionist. So I'm sorry, I got that out of my system. I don't know, I blame you. You were the one who proposed talking about that, I think.
I think it's interesting. We got a celebrity in there. We got Sloan Wilson.
His father wrote the novel The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. Is that the name of that novel?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, a little housekeeping, and then we're going to cut it off short of an hour for once.
Yeah.
The redesign, comment, then you were last seen mocking that.
Mocking the redesign?
Yeah.
I love the redesign. Where did I mock it?
Well, the part when I was talking about it and you were pretending to fall asleep.
I was mocking you.
Yeah.
Not the redesign.
Mm-hmm.
The redesign, I think, is great.
Yeah. It's got a couple of issues.
The only thing I don't like not being able to see how many comments there are. Because it's sort of like how many he who dies with the most comments.
That's not like intentional. That's just one of those things you don't tend to. And all there are a number of little things. All of these things are much harder to do than you would think. All the little fixes we need to make. And then some of the bigger fixes that arguably you could make are really, really hard. But all the little things involving the comment section, you would be shocked.
Anyway, I think it's elegant and it's very well done. And then there are hundreds of little gimmicks and things you can do that I don't know about.
Yeah.
I assume, are useful.
Well, it's gotten just near universal acclaim, I would say. For example, Kidney Stones said, the interface is still too busy, but at least I don't feel like throwing up.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, don't you kind of want Kidney Stones to blurb your next book?
I think Kidney Stones attacked me recently, so I'm not
Stones?
Not feeling good about Kidney Stones.
You sure it's a he?
Sorry?
Are you sure Kidney Stones is a he?
No, I'm not, but he sure writes like a he. Or she sure writes like a he.
That sounds like a sexist comment. You mean viciously?
He or she is fearless in his or her opinions.
Oh, and women aren't fearless?
You're the evolutionary psychologist, Bob, not me. Because they know that in a war...
No, actually, in many ways, men are more fearful, according to evolutionary psychology. They're more
okay. Because the women
fearful
know that
of losing status, and for that reason, less inclined to stand up for principle.
Huh.
All right, that's conjectural, but it's consistent with my observations of you. Oh, and remember when Joel Cairo won the Dinglink contest, and so he got a copy of the book of his choice, which, as it happens, was not yours, Mickey?
Was it yours, Bob?
Yeah, and I sent it to him, and so he sent an address, and you know what? Much to my surprise, his real name is not Joel Cairo. He was using a username that is not his real name.
What's his real name?
I'm not going to say it on the air. Maybe he wants to keep it private, but it just set off this chain of thought. I'm now realizing that for all we know, Bloggin' Noggin, that could be not his real name. It could be Bloggin' Jones or something.
It could be David Corn.
It could be. Oh, come on could be oh, come off. And speaking of commenters and David Corn, I'm glad you made that connection. David Corn, and I was down in Washington evangelizing for Blogging Heads and doing like synergistic things, And one of them was having coffee with David Corn at Starbucks. And a woman walked up to us, said she likes Blogging Heads.
Really?
And she, in the past, has been a commenter under the name Lily, and I have read one of her comments. And you might think, since she hasn't commented in a long time, that she had lost track of the site, but she said she liked the redesign.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
No, they're more. I mean, there are enough people who watch Blogging Heads that the chances of running into people on the street are actually pretty high.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and almost any, it doesn't have to be a Starbucks in Washington. I mean, you could be in, I don't know. You could be in a Starbucks in Manhattan.
Iowa is where we want.
Yeah, well. And then, did I say that Nate started a Wikipedia entry for Blogging Heads?
I thought we've had a Wikipedia entry for a long time.
No, I think you've had your own, and Blogging Heads has only had one for a matter of weeks, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We have him to thank.
Does it, never mind.
Well, no, go ahead.
No.
Now, on that note, is there anything else I need to say about the redesign? I guess not. I guess, should we end this and then, change our shirts and tape our New Year's thing?
Oh, do I have to change my shirt?
Yeah, because then no one will know that we actually did it today.
That's not in my contract. You're going to have to pay me for that.
Oh, we'll buy the shirt. This is Blogging Heads.
Actually, I have a writer's strike shirt. I'll put that on.
Okay. So let's click stop, and this will be the end of our Feliz Navidad edition. And then we'll get on to Prospero Año, or what is it, Año Nuevo?
Correct.
Okay.
Anyway, Merry Christmas.
Same to you, and Happy Holidays.